Hello BookTube, this is part 42 of my 2022 library tour, Science Fiction and Fantasy 19. Today I'm starting the final bookcase of my 2022 library tour. It's the one that my brother built about 3 years ago. It's a really big, shoddy thing that I adore because my brother built it, even if it is a piece of poop. But anyway, it's a very big bookcase. There's a lot of books on it. So I'm going to get going on it because there are a lot of books to get through. And it's going to be rough because taking a quick look at the books on this bookcase, I'm not the biggest fan of any of them. So the first book is The Winged Histories by Sofia Samatar. I want to say this is a standalone sequel to an earlier novel of hers. It's about 4 women who face adversity in a fantasy world, and I didn't care for it at all. I read it about 2 or 3 years ago, and I think I bailed fairly quickly. The next 3 books are by Brandon Sanderson, an author that I've struggled with. I haven't gotten to Mistborn, his most famous work. It's the first in, I think, the Elantris series. It's about people who can, by ingesting various metals, enact various magical effects. And then there's a Dark Lord who won and something. I haven't gotten around to this yet, and I know a lot of Sanderson's fans say you should start with this book, but given the fact that I've tried him twice and I've bailed, I don't know if I really should give this one a go. One of the Sanderson books that I have tried is The Way of Kings, the first book in the Words of Radiance. No! The Stormlight Archive. The series is the Stormlight Archive. Anyway. So I've had at least 2 or 3 goes at this book, and I never made it past 100 pages. It's just, I mean, I don't like Brandon Sanderson's style. I don't, it didn't hook me. And for a book this gigantic, you've got to hook me pretty dang quickly. And it's bloated. Why exactly you need 10 of these to tell a story? I don't know. Anyway. But for some stupid reason, I also bought the second book in the Stormlight Archive, Words of Radiance. Next is Imara by Charles Saunders. This is a classic of sword and sorcery. It's the first work of Sword and Soul, which is a spin-off genre of sword and sorcery that focuses on African themes and history. I want to like Imaro, but obviously my last reading was a bail, and when I did successfully read it a few years ago, I don't think I liked it much, to be honest. So, another book I didn't care for is Barsk, The Elephant's Graveyard by Lawrence M. Schoen. This is a space opera in which anthropomorphic animals who may or may not be either aliens or uplifted terrestrial animals live on various planets, and stuff happens. I didn't care for this at all. Next is Snakewood by Adrian Selby. I picked this up a few years ago and haven't gotten around to it yet. I think I read something about Selby on Blackgate or another science fiction and fantasy website and thought it sounded intriguing, but Never gotten around to it yet. Next is another book I haven't read yet. We Are the Dead by Mike Sheckle. This is a grimdark fantasy that I think I saw a review of somewhere, and I thought it sounded interesting, but haven't gotten around to it yet. Next is a book that I really don't like, and that is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is, at least for the moment, a one-volume epic fantasy in which a world where people centuries ago were dominated by evil dragons, although some dragons do still exist, who are friendlier to humanity. I really didn't like the book. I didn't like the characters. I didn't particularly care for the plot, the world building. Particularly early on, just really annoyed me, and it's about a week of my life I'm never going to get back. When I actually did read it, I had a fail or two before that. Next is an anthology, New Sons, original speculative fiction by people of color, edited by Nisi Shaw, which, like all anthologies, is mixed. There were some stories I rather liked, some that I didn't really like. So, yeah. Next is Children of the Night by Dan Simmons. This is a modern vampire novel set in Romania. And I bought it from the Friends of the Library book sale Nook for 25 cents. Yeah, I've dipped into it and didn't particularly care for it, so yeah. Next is White Trash Warlock by David R. Slayton. This is an urban fantasy about a gay warlock who's not particularly powerful, who acts as a sort of occult detective. He's called in by his brother to help his wife deal with some kind of eldritch attack, and that leads to basically saving Denver. I didn't particularly care for this novel at all. I think maybe had the story followed the kind of like the intro arc of the story, maybe it would have been a bit better, but the story as it is, didn't particularly care for. The next two books are various short story collections by Clark Ashton Smith. This is Lost Worlds, which came out several decades ago, and I'm thinking is a British edition. And I quite like this edition. I read it about 3 years ago. And then The Return of the Sorcerer, which is the first Clark Ashton Smith I ever read, and has a funny story which I told when I talked about this in February. And my last reading of this collection was a bit disappointing, but I do still really like his work. And finally, I have a Penguin classic of Clark Ashton Smith, The Dark Eidolon and Other Fantasies, which is quite good too. Next are two books by Nancy Springer. The Right Heart, which I read a few years ago and didn't like, and I think I bailed on it, and for some reason I bought a copy from the Friends of the Library book sale Nook for 25 cents. And of course I have The Golden Swan, which I talked about a few months ago in February, well, last month, because I tried to read this for February Fantasy Stories, and yeah, really didn't like it. It's sort of a Celtic fairy tale-y inspired thing about a young boy who's born a wolf, and yeah. And largely the main reason why I think I bought this book is I love this cover, and particularly this cover model. Anyway, next is 6 books by John Sprunk. First up is Shadow Sun, which is the first book in one trilogy. I read this a few years ago and didn't like it. I think it would have been better had the main villain been the hero, but anyway, I didn't like it. And I haven't gotten around to its sequels, Shadow's Lure or Shadow's Master. I also have the Book of the Black Earth trilogy, at least I think it's a trilogy. This is Blood and Iron. Storm and Steel. And Blade and Bone. And I have a few novels by Neal Stephenson. This is Snow Crash, one of the seminal works in cyberpunk. It's about a young man who basically is a mercenary delivery man. I dipped into it a few years ago because I'm kind of obsessed in a period when I was obsessed with cyberpunk, but I never really got into it, and I bought this on the intention to eventually read it, although this copy is pretty beaten up. And I also have the Diamond Age, which is one of the earliest examples of steampunk, which is basically cyberpunk set in the Victorian age, or similar, even though the punk part of it kind of fades out. And I also have Cryptonomicon, which I think I picked up from the Friends of Thought Book Sale Nook for 25 cents. The Diamond Age, I think I picked up from Golden's. Next is The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. This is the first book in an epic fantasy series in which magic is done through bones, I think, and this is about the emperor's trying to get his daughter ready to rule or something or other. Next is A Meeting at Corvallis by S.M. Sterling. This is, I think, a sequel to Dice of Fire. I was hoping this was the first book, but it's not. And I'm annoyed by that. Next is another anthology, The Locus Awards, edited by Charles N. Brown and Jonathan Strahan, which is a rather good anthology, I think. It's been a while since I've read it, but I think this is a pretty good one. Next is another Jonathan Strahan anthology, Swords and Dark Magic, The New Sword and Sorcery, edited by Jonathan Strahan and Lou Anders. This includes a lot of sword and sorcery written in the 2000s, I think. It includes Joe Abercrombie, C.J. Cherry, whose story is pretty good, Glenn Cook, whose story was pretty good in here, James Ean, Stephen Erickson's story, which is fantastic, Greg Keyes, Caitlin R. Kiernan, Tim Levin, Kenneth Lee, whose story is pretty good, Scott Lynch, Michael Moorcock, Garth Nix, K.J. Parker, Michael Shea, Robert Silverberg, Bill Willingham, and Gene Wolfe. And it is one of my favorite anthologies. And next is The Golem's Eye, the second book in the Bartimaeus trilogy by Jonathan Stroud, which I picked up from, I want to say, Golden's Book Exchange. I picked this up during my last trip to Golden's because I found this in the free cart outside during my wait for the bus. It was that, Anyway, I don't know exactly why I picked it up though, because I had to go at the first book in the series, which I don't remember what it was. but I didn't like it. So I don't know why I picked up the sequel, but I did. Next is Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri. This is the first book in a duology called The Books of Amba. It's about a young woman who is forced to join a religious convent and discovers she has magical powers and reawakens the gods who've been sealed for millennia. I didn't particularly care for. I didn't like this book. The last books on the shelf are by Sam Sykes. The first three are the Eon's Gate trilogy. This is Tome of the Undergates, which I bought from Hastings shortly before they closed. And then I bought the sequels through Alibris. This is Black Halo, in a rather beaten up copy, and The Skybound Sea, again in a rather beat up copy, although I think this is the next library. And finally, I have the first book in his most recent series, The Grave of Empires. This is book 1, Seven Blades in Black. And I haven't read any of these yet, although I've been thinking about getting the Eon's Gate series because, I've been interested in his work for about 10 years, but haven't gotten around to it yet. So that was part 42 of my 2022 library tour, Science Fiction and Fantasy 19. So there are only 2 shelves left, so I will be finishing my library tour on Friday, and I'm quite looking forward to it. And yeah, and then I'll do a bit of a reflection on Monday, probably before I watch Monday Night Draw with David Finch and Meredith Finch. So anyway, BookTube, I will see you tomorrow for part of 43 of the library tour. So until then, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.